partnership and of prohibition. And, like monogamy, how do we deal with all that? That's one kind of legal question. The sexual and prohibited claims, the legal claims, right? And how do we deal with the mythic claims? So what I have in front of you is some ideas about both. And what I want to do first is give you a really quick frame for not the mythic, we're going to do that at the end, but for the more technical questions. And you heard them dealt with. Take a look at page 10. You heard them dealt with by Rizal. Now, this is all in Hebrew, so I apologize. It hasn't been translated yet anywhere, and I didn't have time to do it myself. But I can tell you what this is. This is a Brit Ahuvim based upon. But I think it's actually scary and wonderful. This is what it is. Partners become Eved Ivri to each other. They become a Jewish slave to the other. Partners become an Eved Ivri, one to the other. Now, what's interesting is it's shocking, of course. Can you imagine using the concept of slavery as a resource for gay weddings?
You're so progressive.
So take a look. On Thursday, it tells the day, it tells the place in the next paragraph. Chashut Afot, Chanamech, Chanat Michal, Bat Marsha, Nachum, Eliezer Atzon, Mishpachat Roth, V'chana, Bat Nechama, Yeta, Meir, to Mishpachat Ezra, Meduvak Karen, Mekaimot. Those are the two women. Mekaimot Benehem, Nizay Edim, they established between themselves in front of witnesses, Brit Ahuvim, a covenant of love, Shehi Shtar Shutafut, and that will be called a document of partnership. And they announce their intentions, Lehikasher B'Shutafut, to establish a connection in partnership, Kidat HaRa'avad, just like the Ravad, Sheshopet Matneh et Atzmo Lechavero, that a partner actually gives himself over or allows himself to be acquired by his partner, Kedin Eved Ivri, like a Jewish slave. Kefi Shepirash HaMarik, and according to what the Marik says, who's an Achar and Halakhic scholar, Shigufo Kanui Umeshubad Lechavero, that his body is owned or sold, Umeshubad, and is held in servitude, Lechavero, to his friend, Ve'eno Yachol Avzoro, and they can't get out of it, Lelo Haskama Shutafo, unless they both agree. Now, I want to put this, firstly, so what are you thinking? We want to have time for the rest of the things, and I don't have a whole lot of time left, so very short, what are you thinking? 4 questions, that's it. Go ahead.
First thing I thought was that doesn't it expire in 7 years then?
No. It doesn't, because it's basically he's explaining the scenario of Shutafut. It's not Eved Ivri, it's Kit Eved Ivri, and Shutafut works like Eved Ivri. Yeah.
I just think this is so, like, the metaphor of the slave, the legal slave is so beautiful because it's co-ownership of, if one owning the other, it becomes this whole cyclical, equal thing, the way that traditional, marriage contract isn't when it's male ownership of the female. And so, I think I should suggest this to some straight couples. Okay.
Do it
co-ownership.
In other words, what you're saying, I think, is really interesting to me, and it's, I think, was powerful. Firstly, remember, Jewish slavery was never Roman slavery. It was never slavery like colonial,
And there's so much obligation.
There was enormous obligation. The slave had to eat the same food as the owner had to give the slave the same food, the same accommodations. He couldn't harm the slave. He couldn't work the slave hard. It was a whole array of others is very different from the kind of slavery that we hear when we hear slave, and it's mutual, so that both are slaves and masters, which changes the dynamic in a really interesting way. Yeah.
What happens if only one of them wants to divorce?
Good question, and not for now, only because we have a lot to cover. But obviously, that would have to be dealt with, and there has to be an array. There's a way to get out of a partnership when only one wants to get out, and one can do it. You need to go to a beit din to do it, but it's not like any one partner has absolute power over the other. Yeah.
This is more of a comment than a question, but the whole thing seems to me terribly just appalling. It's just appalling, and it just strikes me as such a cop-out, and it's more about civil union than rewriting the text, perhaps somehow to incorporate marriage law. It's a cop-out.
Okay, good. So we're going to get to the mythic piece, which may please you better, but I understand why this may be problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, so why I didn't just use the avenue of the neder, right? Which this language is very upsetting to me. Later it's not to everybody, first says me. Because it doesn't seem to me to get out of the problem with Kiddushin, which is like this comes from a society that I'm not so happy about. But it seems to me it would be similar, right? I know we're not supposed to take vows, but one could take a vow to be sexually exclusive with another person, and that would be binding unless you went to a beit din to have it annulled.
Right.
And so I'm curious about.
I think that what you mean. Rav Zalman suggested that, and I think it's one way to actually shift this. However, what's great about this circumstance, and what I like about it, is that there is something, when we say Ani L'Dodi and L'Dodi Li, we actually are saying that I am not in full ownership of myself anymore. I actually have given away a piece of the ownership of my body and of my life to someone else. There's a certain kind of absolute that is real. Now the question is, does the mutuality of it heal it from the potentials of problematics? In other words, when I'm a master and a slave at the same time. So I hear the problematics. I like the fact that it's problematic and interesting because I think we don't really understand. Too much independence in marriage is not good either, and too much servitude is not good either. So figuring out exactly what we mean by this kind of thing. The neder is a little alone because I'm neder that my body belongs to you. But it's actually independent. The neder can't be doubled. I can't say, and only if you will make a neder for me. So it's very independent, which is good in some ways, problematic in others. So there's something immediate. We're both immediately both masters and servants of each other. And that means that if someone says, honey, I really need you to help me with this, I am your servant, dear. There's something beautiful in that too, as long as it's not unilateral, and as long as it can't ever be switched. There's something marvelous, a little bit S&M, but something marvelous in the articulate. By the way, we don't have to accept this once again. I just think that I love the ability of the tradition to actually open up resources that we'd never thought about, and in some ways problematic ones. But now I want to move on. Yeah, please.
Just one quick, I love the idea of bringing in the Rabbin and the other sources, even though the sources might be problematic, because it gives the document, it found the document inside the old sources and gives it an imprimatur that it might not have if it was just created otherwise.
Right. Whether you want to use shutafut, you might want to say v'shelo kedat rabbi, not like the rabbi who believes we're servants to each other. But I actually found it interesting that this lesbian couple wished to actually agree with the rabbi and wanted to create a kind of mutual service in that way. I want to turn away from this. I think it's really exciting. By the way, the neder I think does work. What's great about the neder as well is that the promise to each other is one thing, but how do you bring God into it? In other words, if a man violates a commitment to a woman in adultery, in a heterosexual frame right now, the only aggrieved partner is the woman, because he promised not to do that. But God, only indirectly. There's no real prohibition for him to have sex with another woman. If a woman fools around, it is. God's involved in that, right? That's just biblically, right? This scenario of shutafut, it's unclear how is God involved if I break the shutafut. What neder does nicely